Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Is 4-core, 4-thread gaming dead at the end of 2019? Well, no, it's not. Yes, you can certainly play games on 4 cores, 4 threads, but it is certainly on its last legs for a lot of titles. Which ones? That's what we're going to take a look at in today's video. I've got a dozen games ranging from fairly basic and simple games all the way up to the latest and greatest high-end big budget blockbusters, which you may or may not love, The Division 2, Ghost Recon, Breakpoint, and a few others. We've got some mid-range games in there, including Call of Duty Black Ops 4, Fortnight, Overwatch, and some others. And frankly, I've got a bunch of different results for you that range from runs great to, well, it technically runs, and so a 6-core processor is not required. Now, in front of me, I have several CPUs, and this list will grow over the next couple of weeks. This is the first in a series of videos I'm going to do. This is looking at 4-core, 4-thread gaming and CPUs. We'll talk about that a bit. Then the next video will look at 4-core, 8-thread gaming, and then we'll add the 6-core, 12-thread chips, and then finally we'll add the 8-core CPUs to see whether or not it really makes a difference. My goal at the end of this is then to do a streaming benchmark comparison because 8 cores, truthfully, is not required right now for gaming. 6 cores, 12 threads does the job pretty darn well, unless you're trying to live stream, multitask, multiple windows, and do other things, and then the extra cores can certainly come in handy. Before we get to that, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators with more than 25,000 classes in design, business, and more. For less than $10 a month, you get unlimited access to every class on Skillshare. That is an unbeatable value. Whether you want to fuel your creativity, curiosity, or career, Skillshare is the perfect place to keep you learning. An example of a class you might start with is YouTube vlogging, how to start a YouTube channel today. If you want to do what I do, you can use this class to give you an idea of where to go. This particular teacher has almost 1,500 students and 71 reviews that you can read on the Skillshare site. Because Skillshare is sponsoring this video, you can sign up with the link in the video description below and you get 2 free months of unlimited access to every class on the site. That's a deal. Okay, now back to the video. Now, if you look in front of me right now, you're going to see several CPUs. These range from old to new, great to terrible, but they're all 4-core, 4-thread processors. The actual CPU used in this benchmark on my AMD test bench right here is the Ryzen 3 1300X. This is a 4-core, 4-thread, first-generation Ryzen processor that runs at 3.6 gigahertz. It is not the slowest chip you can run these games on. It's not the fastest. I picked a middle-of-the-road CPU to represent everything from an i5 2400 all the way up to an i5 7600K running at like 4.5 to 5 gigahertz. Somewhere in there is a middle ground, and so a Ryzen 3 1300X is that middle ground. You can see I have a lovely Athlon X4 860K here, which is way slower than the Ryzen chip, and then you can see I've got some nice Intel CPUs. Actually, the 8th and 9th gen i3s are the 4-core, 4-thread chips. They're really just rebadged i5 7600s and 7600Ks. That's neither here nor there. But all the chips that fall in the category from 2011 to, frankly, this year, to be honest with you, even the latest Ryzen 3 3200G is a 4-core, 4-thread chip, and it's a little bit faster than this 1300X, but not much, because the 3200G is a Zen Plus, not a Zen 2. Quick note for those curious, I want to be absolutely clear that 4 cores and 4 threads is not at all the same as 4 cores and 8 threads. If you have an i7 7700K or a Ryzen 5 1400 or 1500X, those are 4-core, 8-thread CPUs. This video doesn't apply to you. The next one will, and we'll start to add to the benchmark charts and compare them. So watch out for that one. Make sure you're subscribed if that's your situation. But today it's all about 4-core, 4 threads. The graphics card today is a middle-of-the-road option. Maybe we can call it a premium middle-of-the-road option. Rather than say, well, we're testing CPUs, so let's put an RTX 2080 Ti on here. Okay, that's ridiculous. Nobody with a 4-core 4-thread chip should be buying an RTX 2080 Ti. That's a $1,200 video card. So I went with the current new premium value king, the AMD RX 5700 XT. It's $400, and at this price point right now, it really is a pretty good value for the money. Yes, it's $400, and yes, some will say it's overkill for these CPUs, but if you want a graphics card you can grow with and maybe do an upgrade to your CPU in the next year or two, then it certainly is a nice choice. Notice I have a new cooler on the test bench. This test bench, by the way, is my Asus X470 ROG Strix motherboard. Not that that really matters for the test, but that's what it is. This is a very nice cooler that I plan to do a review on. It's the first time I've taken a look at this company, and I'll link to it in the video description below. It's really nice for the price, actually. I was impressed. For system memory, we have 16 gigabytes of DDR4, 3200 megahertz CL16 RAM, very nice G.Skill Trident Z memory right here. And then all of the benchmarks you're about to watch were recorded externally on a hardware capture card on a second computer, so no performance was lost to show you the actual benchmark runs that I'm about to show you. Some live gameplay, some built-in benchmarks. MSI Afterburner provided both the real-time performance numbers in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, as well as the average 1% and 0.1% lows that you're going to see. Yes, even the built-in benchmarks are all 1% and 0.1% lows. I'm not doing any more minimum, any more maximums. I've heard you guys loud and clear, so we're not doing that anymore going forward. Two quick notes before we get to the benchmarks. Number one, there's a lot. And if you're looking at the length of this video and your first reaction is to run to the comment section below, which I appreciate, if you run to the comment section and go, oh, come on, man, Tech, just give us the answer. Why do you have to go on with these long benchmark runs? I understand, but benchmark charts can be deceptive. They only give you a small piece of the picture. If you're here for entertainment and just sort of want an answer and are kind of goofing around on YouTube, well, fair enough. Maybe you don't want to spend 30 minutes listening to or watching a benchmark video. But if you genuinely want to be informed, if you want a perspective on the actual experience of playing these games, and as the benchmarks run and the footage runs, I'm going to talk about various experiences that I had, good and bad. If you're interested in that, you genuinely want to know, can you get away with this for longer? What games really is it weak on? Where do you need to think about an upgrade? Consider watching the whole video. That's why I'm providing this information. I could do a 6-minute video and just throw some charts up, but it would be really bad information. And frankly, I think you're cheating yourself if you just want the 5-minute answer. At least if you're genuinely wanting to know the answer for your own personal consumption. Entertainment, well, I'm working on it. The second point that I would like to make is that one of the reasons I picked the Ryzen 3 1300X here rather than say like an older i5 is the Ryzen platform is upgradable. I'm actually using this 1300X on the second generation 470 motherboard, but if it was on a B350, you could certainly upgrade. Ryzen is pretty cool. Shame on you, Intel, for continuing to replace motherboards. AMD is pretty cool because a first, second, third gen Ryzen, they're all upgradable. So maybe 2 years ago you got a budget machine. Maybe you put together a budget build and you got a 1200 or 1300X. No problem. If you're not happy with the performance numbers you're about to see, you can drop a Ryzen 7 2700 or a Ryzen 5 3600 on and get a lot more performance without having to change out motherboards and reinstall Windows and do everything else. So credit to AMD for that. This is also normally the part of the video where I say, everything on the desk will be linked in the video description below. Please use my links. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll link the video card, and I'll link the cooler because actually it's pretty cool, pun intended. As far as the CPUs, I actually don't think you should buy a 4-core 4-thread chip in late 2019 or going into 2020. You can actually get a Ryzen 3 1200 for like $60 brand new, which sounds like a deal, but it's not. Because for like $100 brand new, you can get a Ryzen 5 1600, which is 6 cores, 12 threads, and demolishes it in every way. So if you're watching this going, can I buy a 4-core 4-thread chip? Please don't. This is meant for people who have one and want to know, do I really need to upgrade, or can I get away with using it for a bit longer? Okay, enough talking. On to the benchmarks. First up, we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey, everyone's favorite crisis of this generation. Having said that, I want you to take a close look at the upper left-hand corner of the screen. The third line in blue, Ryzen 3 1300X. Notice the CPU is pegged solid at 100% usage. Notice the graphics card is bouncing around between 50 and 60% usage. We are deeply and completely CPU bottlenecked here. This game absolutely wants a better CPU than this. At least with this video card, at least. If you put a very slow video card on it, it wouldn't be nearly as fast. Now, some of these benchmarks I'm going to cut short and try to trim this as much as possible so it's not really half an hour long. But I'll leave this one in so you can see that it never comes off of 100% usage. If you're playing the latest games like this, yeah, 4 cores, 4 threads, that's a big fat nope. 56 frames per second average. If all you did was look at a benchmark chart, you might look at this and go, wow, whoa, look, 56 frames per second, everything's fine, what's the problem? Well, the 1% and 0.1% lows are part of it, but even then you might say, wait, I get 39 frames per second 99% of the time and an average of nearly 60? 4 cores, 4 threads is plenty. Do you really think in active combat, in busy areas, not a built-in benchmark where you're not doing anything, that's just a graphics test, do you actually believe that 56 frames per second is going to hold? No, it's not. Call of Duty Black Ops 4. Now, this demonstrates the importance of map selection because I have played this game on better CPUs than this and did not get this frame rate. Unfortunately, this is what was running when I benchmarked it, and what can I say? I don't have the CPU on the test bench. I've changed the configuration around. If I had this to do over again, I definitely would have tested this differently, so take this one with a grain of salt. Now, the CPU usage is up around 100%, and it would certainly run smoother if we weren't on this CPU. However, this map in this game mode is unfortunately not reflective of the overall experience in this game. And when I do the 4-core 8-thread comparison, I'm actually going to skip this game. I'll show it to you, but I'm not going to compare it to the Ryzen 3 because the maps were different. Either that or I'll have to stick it back in the computer and change it because, oh my lord, is it completely different depending upon which map you're on. I don't test this or play it very often, so this one caught me a little bit by surprise, but I don't have time at this point to go back and re-benchmark it, and I'm only leaving it here because, well, I did it, and so you can see on this map it's great, but my experience tells me it's not in most places. 155 frame. I can't even say that with a straight face. It's nuts. That is not reflective of the game. I have, since I benchmarked this, while I'm recording this voiceover, I have already since played this on a different map and got like a third less performance on a 4-core 8-thread chip. So take this with about a pound of salt. Counter-Strike Global Offensive, everybody's favorite game that runs on any potato computer. Ridiculous to test it on this hardware, correct? Well, yes and no. It is a bit ridiculous to play this on an RX 5700 XT. We are playing 1080p high. Yes, I know competitive players play at 1080p low or 720p low or whatever. We're currently getting over 170 frames per second average. Well, I spoke too soon. Now it's 167 frames per second average. But our current real-time 1% and 0.1% lows are way below those numbers. Now, to be sure, part of that is going to be from the match resets and from the perspective jumping from the different characters. But the reality is, it's not as smooth as you might think. 174 frames per second average, super mega awesome, right? Well, yes, except 58 frames per second, 1% low, 8 frames per second, 0.1% low. And this was recorded for long enough to take all of the small little problems out. I just let it sit here and run on that replay for 12 minutes and 34 seconds as I sit here and look at the recording. So that's long enough to be interesting. It certainly is smooth enough mostly, but if you're really serious about this game, you might want to consider more than 4 cores. F1 2019, this is the first time I've tested 2019. It's kind of the same as 2018 and 2017 in Well, they really haven't updated this in a while. It does run fine. We are CPU bound, even though it doesn't say 100% usage at the moment. I'd like to point out that we're not even using, well, okay, we weren't using, but now we are using more than 50% of the RX 5700 XT, but we're definitely not using all of it. So if you've got $400 for a graphics card, I strongly suggest you upgrade your CPU before you do anything else. Did I mention the Ryzen 5 1600 was $100 brand new? 130 frames per second average, 93.1% low, and 49.1% low. Yeah, sure, except for the fact that a 5700 XT is kind of silly and overkill here for 1080p high detail. Go to 1440p, or heck, even 4K. 4K, if you adjust a couple of the detail settings, might not be nuts on this graphics card in F1 2019. Far Cry New Dawn, the full price DLC to Far Cry 5. The frame rate here doesn't look bad, but again, just like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, this is a built-in benchmark where you're not doing anything and you're not controlling the game. Built-in benchmarks like this are really, really good at graphics card comparisons, and they're really poor at CPU comparisons. Notice the CPU's up there around 90% usage, the graphics card's around 50% usage, and it's frankly, the frame rate is all over the place. I strongly suspect that the minute you get into a really serious firefight in this game, the performance will completely fall apart. The game won't be responsive. The frame rate will be fine, but you'll try to control your character and there'll be a ton of input lag because the CPU is just absolutely slammed and has nothing left to load the world and to process everything that's actually going on, especially in something more busy than what you're currently watching there. 74 frames per second average, 55.1% low, 44.1% low. It looks really nice. And again, if you're just looking at charts, you could convince yourself that Far Cry New Dawn is good for this sort of CPU. And yeah, no, it's really not. Fortnight, one of the most popular free-to-play games available on the market today. Surely this is a slam dunk home run. Wait a minute, something's wrong here. 94% CPU usage, 92, 95. I'm not even in combat at the moment. I'm just laying planks here. What happens if we get into combat? Well, the frame rate's great. Take a look. Oh no, it dipped there for a second. We are currently averaging 151 frames per second. Oh, no, that's not going to be good. Let's deploy that. But notice the frame dips. I'm going to try to show you enough of this to give you a chance to watch the real-time numbers, because the average looks spectacular, but the average is across a lot of gameplay. Notice we're dipping under 60 frames per second at times there. Now it's up here. Now it's at 90. So we were at 100 and something, and now we're at 90 something, and there were some 50 somethings. Take a look at the 1% and 0.1% low. It's okay. It's playable. Here's the challenge. This is 100% absolutely totally beyond any shadow of the doubt completely playable on a 4-core 4-thread chip. It really is. If that's what you've got and you play and you're not super competitive and you just want to have some fun, rock on. It will do the job. However, if you are a serious competitive player, the hitches in combat, the bumps, the lag spikes from the game being slightly overwhelmed here and there in small pieces will drive you absolutely nuts. Did I mention a Ryzen 5 1600 was $100? Sell your Ryzen 3 1300X for $50 or maybe even $40 used. Spend $50 or $60, get 6 cores, 12 threads, and have a much, much better experience. I cannot overemphasize the fact that average frame rates do not always reflect performance. Sometimes they do. But boy, Fortnite, they absolutely don't. 163 frames per second, clearly a victory, but it's not. 26, 1% low. 1% of all the frames of that entire match were at or below 26 frames per second. And the reality is, because the match involves flying around, collecting resources, getting into combat, that relative percentage indicates that the heavy combats, and you saw it there, I put enough footage in there that you got to see, and I'm probably going to show more of this than anything else except for maybe Ghost Recon Breakpoint and Division 2 because they're sort of the opposite spectrum. But Fortnite's supposed to be playable on anything. And while this was playable, I did notice in the actual gameplay that it was not as smooth as the average frame rate would indicate. Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Wow, do I have a lot to say here. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet because this can be summed up as, yes, it is absolutely, totally, 100% playable, but it's a pretty lousy experience, all things considered. I now have over 30 hours of playtime in Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Not in the benchmark, but I've been playing the game. I'm enjoying it. Unless something drastic happens, I'm going to beat this game. I beat the Ghost Recon Wildlands. I'm going to beat this one as well. Let me offer you this thought. There's playable, and then there's playable. And this is definitely the former and not the latter. What do I mean? The hitches and the stutters are awful. I'm playing this in easy mode. I don't need a huge challenge. I just play to relax, chill out, and basically act like Rambo and kill everybody and not worry too much. If you were playing this on a hard difficulty, if you were playing this in PvP, you'd get your butt handed to you. The frame skips and the outright game pauses are brutal. I'm not showing it to you here because I actually had to benchmark this more than once. I had so many complete game freezes that the numbers weren't useful. Even the average number was destroyed by it. This spot that I'm in right now, I actually drove that truck. See my lovely truck? I drove this down the hill. It took a huge amount of damage coming down the hill. There were two separate sections where the game just froze. One of them for over 2 straight seconds. Just completely, the screen froze. The computer was not frozen. The MSI Afterburner numbers were not frozen. The game was frozen. The CPU pegged to 100%. The graphics card scaled well down. I checked caps lock, num lock. Everything worked, but the game just froze. It was loading the new world as I came down the mountain, and it did it again once I got down and got out of the truck and started scouting with the Recon drone there. The game froze for an entire second. And so I actually had to stop recording and stop benchmarking and then start again. And then I had to stay in this relatively small area to keep the open world from loading, to keep any full 1 second game freezes as I went into a different area, because otherwise all the numbers just went to one, the benchmark numbers, and what is 111? That's not, well, the average wasn't 1, but it's not useful. Could you play this game on this computer? Yes. But it's why? No, it's not meant for it. It's not designed for it. It struggled. It was a generally lousy experience. Now, some of you might very well say, well, what are you talking about? I've played it on this, or it seems okay. I can live with a little bit of that. Yeah, okay. You do what you want. Having played this on better machines, and by better, I don't mean, i9 9900Ks. By better, I mean Ryzen 5 1600s and 2600s. It is a completely different experience. If you are running something like this 1300X, and you want to play Breakpoint or something similar, or if you want to play Cyberpunk 2077 when it comes out, if you want to play Watch Dogs Legion or any of these big open world games, oh my lord, stop hurting yourself and get rid of your 4-core 4-thread CPU and get yourself a 6-core 12-thread at the least. Brand new, they're $100, and you could probably pick them up used for even less if you hunt around for a little bit, and your current CPU is worth something. So there's just no need to try to play these sorts of games. The only other thought that I will offer you is that if you've got the time and the money to play Ghost Recon Breakpoint, $100 for 6 cores? Yeah, make it happen. 49 frames per second average, 29.1% low, 22.1% low, and that is after restarting the benchmark from complete game freezes. Those benchmark numbers do not reflect how bad the experience really was. It was all over the place. I actually ended up playing this game for more than 20 minutes. This particular benchmark run, when I restarted, it was 18 minutes and 52 seconds to be exact. And it's functions, but man, it's just... The real world experience, forget the video, the real world experience was really poor. Moving on to a game that was not poor whatsoever, even though it did peg that CPU out to the max. This is Overwatch. Yes, I'm playing as my main diva. This was very, very nice. Complete opposite to Ghost Recon Breakpoint. While certainly if you are a professional competitive player, if you take your game super mega seriously and maximum performance and maximum frame rate, maximum frame time, okay, if you're that person, you're not playing on a Ryzen 3 1300X. I certainly hope you're not. However, if you are not that person, if you just want to play Overwatch and have a good time, yes, it will do it. Now, if you look at the graphics card, it's only being 50% used. This graphics card's a waste. An RX 580 for 1080p high detail. This is 100% render resolution. Yes, I do check in Overwatch because it loves to rescale itself. This is overkill. But if you're doing 1440p or, well, 4K would be fine. But if you're doing 1440p, then yeah, this would be really nice. If you want a 1440p 144 frames per second, it would be doing it with this video card right now. That's really not that bad, actually. So I could show you a ton of this gameplay, but I'll just show you the chart because, frankly, it was really nice. 144 frames per second average, 82 1% low, 6.1% low. But Overwatch, when you die, you respawn. It triggers the 0.1% low. Don't worry about the 0.1% low here in Overwatch, and this is where my commentary in the live gameplay is so important, because I can tell you not to worry about it because the experience did not reflect that in the actual gameplay whatsoever. So disregard the 0.1% low in Overwatch because of respawns. The 1% low is fair. The average is nice. This was very, very playable. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, another one of those AAA beautiful games that really wants a 6-core processor. Actually, it will use 8 cores if you have 8 cores to throw at it. Now, if you look at the real-time performance here, you might say, what are you talking about? We're over 60 frames, well, we're over 60 frames per second. The graphics card's about 50% utilized. That's kind of what Overwatch was. Where's the problem? Clearly, it would be okay. Yes, it is in the built-in benchmark, but it's not going to be in the game. The exact points where you need the performance is where you won't have them. Look at that frame rate just drop off right there. 89 frames per second average is deceptive. 28 frames, 1% low, 8 frames, 0.1% low. This would be very hit and miss. It'll be great performance when you're not doing anything, and it'll fall apart the minute Laura has to make a jump or a shot or some trick. The minute you're actually doing something in the game that requires timing and challenge is when the game's going to stutter on you. Steep is a game that I've tested several times. It's not a game that I have enough personal experience in to give you a wide range of judgment. I'll give you that disclaimer. When I am comfortable with the game's performance, I can give you that kind of in-depth analysis. In this one, I have played it a little bit. I've actually gone and done some jumps and some stunts, but not enough to be a performance expert. The performance here looks okay. It's not bad. The CPU usage is pretty high. This game is almost certainly playable on this. Although I imagine there's times you're going to get some stutters and a little bit of hesitation within the game. But it's really not that bad, all things considered. And while it didn't stay above 60 frames per second all the time, it was better than some of the others. 92 average, 51 1% low, and 34.1% low. The Division 2 is another recent AAA open-world, big-budget title, so clearly it's just crap on the Ryzen 3 1300X. Yeah, this surprised me more than anything else. You are watching me engaged in combat with multiple enemies out here in broad daylight with a lot of the terrain visible, shooting and explosions and turrets and drones and other stuff going on, and we are over 60 frames per second on a 4-core 4-thread chip running at 3.6 gigahertz without very much problem. I played this for about 15 minutes. I killed some people on the street. I did a side quest. This was shockingly playable. I would not want to play it in the dark zone in PvP, but this was amazingly playable. And if you've got this chip, yeah, it blew my mind. I mean, there's no other way to put it besides, wow, it was amazing. Now, the graphics card is bottlenecked by our CPU. If you're playing at 1080p high, you don't need a 5700 XT, and RX 580 is just fine. But the Division 2 is amazingly well optimized. 76 frames per second average, but more importantly, a 51.1% low and a 40.1% low. It was smooth, it was playable, it was everything that Ghost Recon Breakpoint was not. And frankly, this was better than Fortnight. Yeah, I know. I don't know what to tell you. Fortnite was choppy and the Division 2 was not. Mind blown. Total War 3 Kingdoms, not a game that I've benchmarked very often. The average frame rate as I'm speaking is really good, but wait for it, it's not going to hold. Spoiler alert. And the 1% low and 0.1% low aren't going to hold either. Yep, there's the frame rate already starting to drop. The challenge to testing a game like this is, what do you test? There's 3 different benchmarks. You could, of course, do live gameplay, but it would take forever. If you play this sort of game, I hope that you can take what you're looking at right here and translate that to your own experience. I'm including it. I've actually had this game requested by a number of supporters, and I wanted to include it here for those of you interested in a different type of game that perhaps needs more CPU power. Notice our CPU is pretty well slammed. Notice the graphics card, it just jumped down to 3% there for a second. The clock speed's way down. We're totally CPU bound. This is 100%. We are brutally CPU bound right here. Notice those frame rates haven't held? Yeah, it just, when you get all those people on the screen, it falls apart. 63 frames per second average, 31% low, 26.1% low. Yeah, I'm sure it would probably run on this, but if you want to play CPU game intensive games like that, actually this is both CPU and GPU intensive, you probably want a better CPU. Thank you all for sitting through those very long benchmarks. If you actually watched the entire thing and didn't fast forward, then you get 2 gold stars. It is greatly appreciated. If you did fast forward, give yourself 1 gold star for at least getting to this part in the video. I have to genuinely say, several of those results surprised me. While it was rough, the fact that Ghost Recon Breakpoint was in fact playable on a 4-core 4-thread chip genuinely surprised me. As I sat there and played, I thought to myself, okay, it's not great. It's rough. Once you've seen better, it's rough. But could you play that game on this chip? Yes. Would I want to? No. It's kind of like once you've had air conditioning, you don't want to give it up. Once you've had something nice, it's going backwards. I don't wash my clothes by hand anymore, and I don't think any of you do either, and it kind of felt like going very retro. So it works, but if you genuinely want to play those kinds of games, you are deeply due for a CPU upgrade. On the other hand, most of the other games ran remarkably well. The frame pacing wasn't always great, the delivery wasn't always great. I certainly wouldn't want to be doing anything else in the background. Running Windows updates and just keeping the machine up to date and doing the installs and everything. It's rough. I mean, once you've had an 8-core 16-thread chip, these feel tremendously slow. It really just, even in Windows, opening Chrome tabs, running Windows Update, downloading the latest drivers, everything feels slow compared to the latest CPUs. However, if you own this, your cost is 0 and a new CPU is not 0, making it infinitely more money. So if you need to wait a year, if it's working for you and budgets are really tight, then by all means, man, stick with it, keep it, use it. Even if you have an older Intel, maybe 2nd, 3rd, 4th gen, I mean, if your budget's tight, yes, you can use it. But the future is very thin on these chips. I can absolutely see within maybe the next 2 years, legitimately not even being able to launch and run new games on 4-cores, 4 threads. That day is coming very soon, in my opinion. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big, huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, you know where that comment section is. I don't respond to everybody, but I do scroll through those and I do read them, and I greatly appreciate you leaving the comments. And then, of course, as always, I will link to just a couple of things in this video down below. Do watch out for the upcoming 4-core 8-thread and 6-core 12-thread. I'm actually not planning on doing 6-core 6-thread like the i5-8400 or i5-9400 or that new OEM-only chip, the Ryzen 5 2500X, which is 6-core 6 threads. It's an Asian-only part. It's not a retail part, not being sold in the West. I know a lot of you will own those, and I'll talk about those in more detail in the next video. I'm really not inclined to test them, but let me know in the comments below whether or not you think that's a big deal. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see all of you next time.